Hello folks, it's been a couple of years since I did a really thorough workshop tour, so as a Christmas New Year break thing I thought I might give you a video of where we're up to with the workshop and be as thorough as I can with all the drawers and things. So if this is not your kind of thing, skip this one, but yeah, hopefully you enjoy the video. Cheers, Happy New Year. Starting in the woodwork end of the workshop, what we've got is my big workbench that you saw me make in a previous video, and table saw, and the bandsaw. This is the Matthias Wandale Wood Gears 20-inch bandsaw, and that's now wired in with a safety switch, an NVR switch, so if there's a power cut the power doesn't come back on. And of course there's a lot of insulation and carpet tiles, but I won't linger on that. Here is the clamp rack which I made, and here I've got my 8-inch jointer and a vacuum and my 15-inch thicknesser. Here I've got my 2 or 2.5 horsepower dust extractor. This runs a 5-inch hose, and I don't have anything hard plumbed yet, so that hose gets lifted off and transported over to the side of the table saw when I want to use it. The table saw is a Wadkin Bursgreen 10-inch AGS model, and this dust cover on the side, I made all this and yeah, set it up for 5-inch port. In the other side of the woodwork area we've got a heap of offcuts of wood, and they are destined to live under this bench here. But under this bench I've got drawers and tubs with power tools in them, and they're all stacked up not very nicely. And the long-term goal or medium-term goal is to have some high-up shelves on this wall and have my power tools all within arm's reach. So yeah, wood under the desk or under the bench, power tools on the wall, and that should be a nice little hand tool and power tool area. I intend to get this engine crane outside. This you know, doesn't need to be in here. Anytime I've got things to move around inside, I've got a 2-ton hoist here which is connected to some really deep beams, and I've also got my pallet jack which is coming in more and more handy with the bigger stuff I make. But coming back to these cabinets, what I've got here is staplers and nailers and woodwork. It's all woodwork related stuff really. I've got marking and measuring tools that are specifically for wood, and got some parts there for a box joint jig I want to make. Another nailer, smaller clamping tools and hammers and wood planes. I'd like to have these on the top once the top is organised. Top is just pretty much a catch-all at the moment. Got some screws and some a bag of rags and that kind of thing. But I think it'd be nice to have all these planes clean, dust-free and on display at the top. I think that'd be nice, and I can reach them more easily and use them more often. In the bottom here I've got a drawer that I keep saws in, and chisels and rasps and luthiery tools, guitar making tools, router bits, table saw blades and accessories and jigs, carving gouges and spoke shaves. Everything's a bit dusty, but it's all in good order. Router stuff and abrasives for woodwork. So that was the black cabinet, and that's really woodworking hand tools in there. The red cabinet is all about drilling, and I've got cordless drills on the top mostly, and spare batteries and the chargers for those drills, and my go-to drill bits that I use all the time. In the front I've got brad point bits, masonry bits, driver bits, spade bits, spare chucks and sleeves and things like that, auger bits, combination bits. I keep my fixings in here too, so I've got small and large screws, and nails and felt stuff and dowels and biscuits. I've got hole saws down here, and knives and blades and sharpening stuff and stones. This is jigsaw blades. A lot of these were fire damaged, but these came from my mate Bill, and he had a whole heap of these, and you know, they haven't got hot enough for the wood to burn, so I'm pretty sure the temper of the steel is still going to be okay. So thanks, Bill. More drills and reciprocating saw, and more of the same. So yeah, the idea of this cabinet is drilling. So I've got some drill charts on the top and the cordless drills on the top, and it is right next to the drill press. And I like everything being sort of logically contained and in the same space. It means I'm not running across the workshop to find a 3mm drill bit. This bit here is a wooden shelf that I made. Again, it's a Matthias Wandel design. It's very simple anyway, but I put some boxes on it, and it acts as a kind of reasonably good storage area for bulky liquids and potions and that kind of thing. But I've had a change of heart with this, and it takes up a bit too much room. You can see vertically that I'm only using about half the space, and I'm not using the bottom bay at all. So I think what I'm going to do is turn these boxes into a set of drawers, and maybe they can live underneath the little green lathe. But in place of this, I want to have a metal cabinet, which I already have, and I want to keep all my solvents in a nominally flame-proof cabinet or a spark-proof cabinet. Now, it's not actually a spark-proof cabinet like you get in an industrial environment, but it's just basically a metal box that will be better than being on an open wooden shelf. And this is that steel cabinet. It's made of really thick stuff. It does have breather vents on the side, but they'd be very hard to get sparks in there. Now it is an electrical cabinet. It was an industrial electrical cabinet, so it needs a couple of shelves adding on the inside, and it needs a bottom adding to it. And then I'm going to wall mount it where the wooden shelves were. I should be able to mount it close up to this beam, and it will only come down about 2/3 of the way, and underneath it I intend to keep my bandsaw, my metalworking bandsaw down there. So that's really the whole woodwork shop. I'll just do a pan over the whole thing. The end is a mess, but that's not a problem. It's being used as material storage really, and it's temporary. So that's the amount of space I've got. That's basically a double garage, and I've got most of what I need in here, with the exception of a couple of sanding machines that I'd like to have. Actually, you see this sheepskin I've got on the bench here. This is to protect guitar bodies, because I've been doing more work on guitars recently. I've been buying and selling and repairing and upgrading guitars, and I'd like to get back into making guitars. I spent a year in the UK training with a luthier called Steve Kendall, and it was one of the funnest times I've had, and I'm really itching to get back to that. And you know, it's one of the reasons I'm building a woodwork shop, is so that I can get back to things like that I've enjoyed in the past. So having a space where my tools can all be used comfortably is really important to make that happen. But yeah, for luthier work, there's a couple of machines that I would need to either buy or build. One is a bobbin sander, and one is a thicknessing sander. Thickness planers, which is that white thing, they're good, they're great, but they don't really work on material that's 1 or 2 or 3mm thick. And also they don't work that well with difficult grain. So that's great for sort of furniture making level stuff, that thicknesser, but for even finer stuff, thickness sanding is the way to go. So one of those is in the cards, I think. in the cards, on the cards. Not sure the best way to say that. You can also see over here the stud wall that is behind these tools, and I had my special Gumtree electrician come out and move the sockets to every second stud along this wall. And the goal with the shelves along the top of these toolboxes is to have them full length, to have the engine crane outside, and to have the lids of the toolboxes stay shut. That way I can have a longer shelf, perhaps a couple of shelves, and that should tidy this area up a lot. Okay, I think that's it for woodwork. Okay, here we are in the metalwork area, and this belt grinder hasn't moved since I made the making of video. And Rusty is alive, in case you're wondering. He's just having a rest on the cold slab. So yeah, the belt grinder needs to live over there in the grinding room, which you can't see at all at the moment, but we'll come to that. And the surface plate is temporarily on this table. It needs its own rolling stand and it needs to go into the clean room, and we'll come to that later too. But this table, this workbench, with its 25mm thick steel top and its drawers full of materials and the materials underneath and the clamps, it weighs a lot and it is extremely stable and flat and brilliant, and I love it. And it needs painting, but that's no big deal. But I'm so happy I made this table, and I love this belt grinder. I'm so happy I made this belt grinder. It's probably the thing that I've made that I'm the most proud of. Because I took my time and did it carefully. It wasn't a prototype level thing. Most of the stuff I do, I tend to do it too quickly, but this I'm really proud of. So moving around clockwise, I've got my set of steel drawers that I cleaned up and I use for hardware storage. These have everything from bearings and washers all the way down to my little gas torch and my fire bricks and all sorts. Earmuffs, PPE in general, stuff for the arbor press because the arbor press is nearby, shelf brackets and all the rest. Next to the drawers, I've got my welder. This is a AC/DC TIG welder. It does 200 amps, runs on an ordinary 15 amp supply. I now use it with a smaller torch, a number 9 air-cooled torch, with a longer flexible lead, and I also use a foot pedal with it, and I thoroughly recommend those things. They make all the difference between good welds and great welds. Even though you saw some bad welds on my grinder, that's to do with I had a bad gas line, I had a gas leak, and I think I had some oxygen coming through. But fundamentally, the welder is much better and easier to use to make better welds with those additions, so I recommend them. This table here was my old welding table. It was my main welding table, but it's not heavy enough, and for some of the things I make, it's not big enough. It has a 6mm thick top, and it's just mild steel, and the frame is 50 by 50, and it's been fine, and it's been useful, but having the thicker top really is handy. I love being able to clamp to that thick top on the other table and know that things are flat and square. And I've been experimenting, now that I'm in my own place, I've been experimenting with storing hand tools and things in an accessible fashion. So being able to reach Allen keys and files and pliers and stuff. And that's sort of turned this little bench and this vise into the sort of the hand tool station, and I'm quite happy with that. In these red drawers I've got a range of things, a lot of hand tools, and there's a drawer of pin punches, centre punches and letter and number punches, and cold chisels and paint brushes and adhesives, tapes, marking and measuring, And all of my cast sockets, I've got 1/4 inch, 3/8 and 1/2 inch. I won't bother going through all that. I've got all my spanners in here. This is a set of metric spanners. This is a second set of metric spanners that open on both ends. And here, they're a bit disorganised, but I'll put them out for you so you can see them. I also have a full set of imperial spanners, so that's been very handy for the old machines I've got. Hammers and dollies and that kind of thing for sheet metal work. And these are some of the things for the bar bender and metal cutting saws. And keep some cleaning brushes and wire brushes in there. Beside that area I've got a bar bender and a plasma cutter and a woodworking straight edge. There's no rhyme or reason to that, they just fit there. And some hoses. But yeah, this is always a work in progress. Clockwise on from the hand tool area, I've got my vacuum with the ash can on top, and I've got my milling machine. The mill is a 1965 Beaver Powell milling machine, which is made in the UK. It's got an American Baldor. Sorry, the mill is made by Balding Engineering, and the motor is made by Baldor in the US. And I've got a standard imported style VFD on that. I've upgraded. I've been cleaning the machine gradually ever since I've owned it, and it's getting better and better. But there is one thing that I will have to repair soon, and that is the spline backlash in the drive mechanism, and I have an idea about how to sort that out. And it involves something that clamps onto this and takes up the backlash versus the disc that's below that's rotating. So I have to keep that drawbar bolt coupled to this using something that clamps on here and bolts down. So that's going to happen at some point. And yeah, I upgraded the vise on this as well. This is a Vertex CNC style vise, and you might have seen me make these hold downs a couple of years ago and the T-nuts just recently. I use these small LED posable lamps, and they allow me to get right in without taking up too much room, and I can really see what I'm doing with those. And of course the VFD, I've still got the Z-axis to do. It may never happen. I've got the glass scale for it, but I just haven't really needed it. And I just keep a few odds and ends hanging on the side here with a bit of ply. I've got the old mini grease gun that I've modified, welded a cap on the end, or glued a cap on the end, and that made it usable upside down as an oil gun. So I'm not using grease in the grease nipples, I'm using oil. And that brings us to the machine tooling toolbox. Again, I like to keep these charts on top. There's a lot of overlapping info in some of these, but cutting speeds and metric to imperial equivalents, tap drill sizes, and so on. I keep some of my mill tooling here, boring head, face mill, end mills, and countersinks and spot drills, more end mills, boring bars, drills, transfer punches, cutting compound, clamping stuff, glues for threads and cylindrical fits, and some slitting saws. I don't get much use of the slitting saws. I need to make a couple of more arbors that fit these, and collets. And then in the drawers we've got, try and get you a good camera angle. I've got basically a lifetime supply of high-speed steel bits A lot of these I got second hand, but I've also modified a lot of them for particular jobs. Drills live in this drawer, and reamers. Some of these reamers came from Matty, thanks Matty. Some of those bigger drill bits came from Ted, so thank you Ted. Taps and dies I have here. A lot of the American stuff actually, UNC and UNF, came from Kimber Zellick, so thank you Kimber. The way I operate with taps is I've bought a cheap set, and the ones that I use all the time I end up replacing when they wear out or break. And what I replace them with is I go and buy 2 or 3 high-end ones of the same size. That way I know I've got a good one and a spare. And well, it depends how much spare cash I've got, but I buy at least 2. And that's what this box is all about basically. It's spare ones for the set. And all of these tap wrenches and things like that, I bought these all used and cleaned them up. They were rusty. This is just random air tool stuff. I've got painting and sanding and rattle guns and sandblasting and air hammer and die grinder. And this is lathe tooling. This is actually not all of it. This is stuff that's for the smallest lathe and for the biggest lathe. All of the stuff I've got for the medium, and a few extras, but all of the stuff I've got for the medium lathe is on the lathe itself. I'll just show you that. So this is the medium lathe, this is the Primo. This is an 11-inch swing by 20 or 22 I think inch between centres. And yeah, I keep the tooling, I just keep most of what I'm using most of the time on tool blocks. And that's an AXA size, 100 size Aloris style tool holder. So yeah, I don't need to visit this drawer very often, but when I do, it's all there laid out, and the inserts are near the tool that needs them. And I've got rivets in the end there because I've got nowhere else for those. Rags, I keep bolts as organised as I can. This is all mill tooling stuff, like I've got 1, 2, 3 blocks and angle blocks and parallels and V blocks. I've got my lovely little machinist jack that Alistair made for me, and clamps and stuff like that, angle plate. And then I've got a couple of drawers of miscellaneous big stuff for the mill that's going to be control boxes and possibly knee power feed, and I've got a little quill DRO to install, and same sort of thing mostly. Okay, so that was the metalworking toolbox. That really services the mill and the lathes, and so the lathes are right here, and that's about as central as I can get it. I really would like the vacuum to be more central, because right now it's hidden, sort of hidden around the corner, and I have to drag it out to use it, but I haven't thought of a way to do that yet. Next along here is a Vernamo shaper. This is an 18-inch shaper, and after doing a bit more research, it is way too big for in here. Way too heavy. It needs to be installed, to use it really, it needs to be installed on something that's about 2 cubic meters of concrete and then bolted to it. And I'm just not willing, this is a domestic house with an ordinary thin slab concrete base, and I'm just not willing to alter the floor like that. So I don't know yet whether this one will stay, but I have done a lot of cleaning on it, and a lot of the original scraping is still visible. And since I bought the Vertex vise for the mill, I now have this shaper vise and its swivel base available for use on the shaper. So, you know, it didn't come with a vise, so that's a good thing. It's an upgrade I've done to it. And secondly, I've also acquired a 3 horsepower single phase motor, so that will run from a domestic supply. So this could be powered by anybody, really. If you're willing to use it slowly and take small cuts and that kind of thing. You probably don't have to bolt it down, but don't take my word for it. I haven't run it yet. It's been on the back burner. I've had more important things to do. So yeah, this may not be here next time you have a look at a workshop tour. And the Primo I showed you a few minutes ago. And temporarily for now, the bandsaw is tucked in here, this is an 8x5 bandsaw. Not that different from the 6x4 bandsaws that everybody's got, except on this the head swivels instead of the vice swiveling. And also it does catch, unlike the 6x4, it has this side wing, so it can catch coolant if you run coolant, but it also catches the dust rather than it going on the floor. And that's pretty handy. Okay, next thing in the metalwork area is this. This is a 14x40 Taiwanese lathe with all metric and imperial built in. I've built a stand that goes underneath it that makes it able to be moved by pallet jack. I've bought a coolant pump that suits single phase. I have a motor for it that is single phase. Sorry, I have a motor that's 3-phase and a VFD that will effectively make it variable speed and work on a single phase supply, which is all I have here. It's a good size. It's about as big as you want in this size space. I think it's 750 kilos, and it takes sort of 8-inch chucks quite comfortably. You could probably take a 10-inch at a stretch. It has a gap bed. The apron on it is, I'll just put my hand there for size, it's a pretty good size apron, It's heavier and beefier than the Primo, and the Primo can take as big a cut as I need, really. So yeah, I just liked the idea of this because no change gears. All the thread pitch stuff is done internally. Proper coolant tray, foot brake, metric lead screw, all metric screws, and it's an enclosed geared head, so that's an upgrade for me as far as I'm concerned over essentially a belt driven head. This has a box on the headstock, but it's a dry belt driven arrangement, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the top speed on this big one is actually more than the medium one. So overall, this lathe can do more than the Primo I've been using. So, and finally, I've had this now for a couple of years and still not really made use of it. Again, it's a back burner thing. This is an Emco Maximat V10P, which is quite a small lathe. It's quite light, but it's very high quality and very precise. And these are a European thing. They're made in Austria, and they have a bit of a cult following. They're more or less the European version of a Myford, slightly bigger capacity, but similar quality. But a few design changes from the Myfords. I mean, these are all metric, I think, these lathes, and they have a geared headstock. It's a geared oil-filled headstock with changes on the front rather than a tall belt drive, and the quick change is all metric oriented, and I believe you could do imperial work if you change the change gears, but I'm trying to operate a metric workshop, so metric machines are the way to go. And for this machine I also have a touch DRO, which I haven't yet set up. I need to buy some scales for it, and that was a gift from Mark Presling, so thank you, Mark. It hasn't been forgotten and it hasn't been ignored. It's just this project is very much on the back burner. As you can see behind it, I'm building the workshop around it, and that's kind of my priority. Also for this machine, I've changed out the motor. The motor was a little bit small, and the switchgear for the motor is a problem on these machines. So you can see I've got a temporary wired up arrangement, but there's a VFD and a 3-phase 1 horsepower motor there that will be mounted to this lathe. I think VFDs on a lathe are a really good idea, and even if you've got a multi-speed headstock, being able to just knock off 5% or add on 5% of speed to get rid of a bit of chatter is a really nice feature. I haven't used that feature yet, but I've seen it in use, and yeah, I'm desperate to get it working on my lathes. So for the metalwork area, that's really it. I'll just give you a pan around. We've got the big bench, again with materials and stock storage in the top. The hardware and hand tool storage, the mill, the shaper and the lathes, and really that's it for metalworking. And I try and keep the floor clear, and people take the mickey out of me for it, but I don't care. If I can walk around without tripping on things, I have a better day. It's as simple as that. You can keep whatever you like on your floor. Okay, this is behind the shaper, and what we've got is, again, the bandsaw position is temporary. I've got everything to do with house maintenance. It's painting and masonry and plumbing and all that kind of stuff, silicon sealant in those filing cabinets, because you know, they clog up the workspace if they don't have their own place. And here I've got timbers. I've got all sorts of timber. I've got some jarrah down there, and some American black walnut, and some celery top pine, and some sassafras, and some hewn pine, Taz oak, and then through into metals. I've got aluminium and brass and steel at the end there, some stainless, and sort of keep a few bits of sheet material here. And I'll just swing around quickly. This is my exercise area. I've got a weights rack here, a Rogue Monster Light, just with a barbell and some dumbbells. But as you can see, I've got all this hardwood clogging up the works. This is the hardwood that's going to become shelves in the clean room, which I'll show you later. But this space does just about work for as an exercise space, but not when there's wood clogging up the works. The grinding room is a mess at the moment, and it hasn't changed since last year really. I'll just point out the things that are going to stay as fixtures. I've got these two shelves with abrasives and electrical stuff on them at the moment. I have the Taiwanese tool and cutter grinder, which I bought from Emma, and that's a machine that needs to be at least cleaned and restored, and I imagine it probably needs quite a bit of scraping and all that kind of thing too. And then over here we've got bench grinders, and here we've got the D-bit grinder, and I tend to keep a stool there because I end up sitting down and using it. I save up till I've got half a dozen to do, and then I just knock them all out in one go. I'm getting quicker at it. Keep the collets there, and underneath I've got polishing gear, and this box is all my Dremel stuff. And you know, I'm not really one for wearing too much protective gear all the time, but my dad had a piece of a wire wheel come out and hit him in the eye once, and he had to have it sort of scraped out, so I always use this whenever I'm doing any grinding of any kind. And I've got a little sandblast cabinet, which is useful, but I do need to plumb in some air permanently, because it's at the point where dragging the airline across the workshop into the compressor becomes it's too much of a pain. I end up not bothering to do the thing, not bothering to use the sandblaster. And you can see the partition wall here between the grinding room, which is where we just looked, and the clean room. That's worked really well. Clean room is not very clean, and it keeps changing purpose. Right now it's more of a music room. I did set up the desk area a bit better. I've cleaned off the desk and put a shelf above for camera stuff, and it's now a bit more conducive to sitting down and editing. I've got electronic stuff in the cabinet there, and 3D printer below. I've got lots of ideas for things I can make with the 3D printer. I just don't seem to have time to do the drawing and the printing. But as life calms down a bit, I think I'll get back to that, and I think I'll have a lot of fun. And that came from my friend Jeff, so thank you, Jeff, for that. This wall here is an absolute mess. This is going to be hardwood shelves left to right, as I've shown you those bits of wood on the exercise gear. I think I'm going to fit 3 shelves or 4 shelves in here from ceiling to that ledge, and have books and projects and electronics gear. And this wall is destined to be metrology stuff, so don't look at that, Ian. I've got things stacked on the box that is the hardness tester, so they're only electronics things, they're not going to hurt the box, but it is at least in a dust-free room now, so that's a good start. But yeah, I've got all my measuring gear in that yellow cabinet. I better show you that quickly. I've got micrometers in the top few drawers, and I've got flat stones and things in the bottom drawer there. And here I've got my indicators, gauge blocks, straight edge thread wires, feeler gauges, a little cylindrical square that I made, parallels. And then I've got audio and video stuff, most of which I'm using right now. Next to it I've got the shadow graph, which was again from Ian, so thank you, Ian. That hasn't had much use other than testing, but as soon as I get through most of the building works, I'm going to start focusing back in this room again and get this room finished off. I've got guitars here that I've been buying and selling and improving, and amplifiers, and they were taking up too much floor space, so what I've done is buy a bunch of wall hangers. So I'm going to try and use that bit of wall up there and just have half a dozen guitars along there. That should be good. And I've actually got a few of these are to sell. They're not all mine really. They've been bought to repair and improve and then sell and make a bit of profit on. So that's the clean room. Oh, and here's my sticker wall. This is the important bit. Anybody on this wall is worth a look. So go and find their channels and see what you can do, see what you can find. My favourite channels at the moment are probably Inheritance Machining and Artisan Makes and KLM, and there's a few others there, but I'd love to get some stickers from those guys as well, and obviously they're all my favourites, but I've been really enjoying the videos from people where there's some skillful machining and metalworking going on, but also some skillful filmmaking and video making, or cinematography, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know the words. But yeah, the idea is some kind of balance between metalworking and filmmaking. Those make up my favourite videos. Now, I'm sure this video is going on way too long, so I will call it a day there. But thanks for watching. Hope you stayed awake through the whole thing. And see you in the next video. Cheers.